name's Nick Francis. I'm the newly appointed Chief Technology and Marketing Officer for Brooklyn Vendor Assurance. In this role, I'm responsible for the technology architecture of the organisation and the marketing goals and objectives for the business, including the overall product direction and how this fits with the brand identity of Brooklyn Vendor Assurance. I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in. The reason why the Chief Technology and Marketing Officer role came about was something to do with maturity of the company. As we're growing as a business, having gone from initial bootstrap startup into more of a scale-up organisation, our wants and needs have changed over time. Whereas I initially started as the Chief Product Officer and as well as the Chief Information Security Officer, we've now rolled them responsibilities up overall into the Chief Technology and Marketing Officer role, bolting internal technology needs and the marketing element onto the role that I now fulfil. One of the main things is to keep the Chief Product Officer element of the role maintained. So we need to keep the pace at which we're building out the product and the speed at which we develop it both at the same, if not faster, iterations than we are now, so speeding up that building of product, but also keeping our existing customers and new customers delighted around the capabilities of what it can do. That's more on the functional sense. On the non-functional sense and more related to the Chief Information Security element of the role, there's a few key accreditations that we need to go through this year, one being SOC 2, so we need to complete our process in terms of readiness and getting ready for audit for our SOC 2 assessment later this year, and ultimately become compliant and accredited to the right standard that some of our bigger customers expect nowadays. In terms of the technology stack and architecture element of the CTMO role, we essentially for the first time need to define the technology stack that we use internally a bit more robustly, and make sure that is both sustainable, scalable and performant and is fit for purpose for the tools we use to operate the business. From a marketing sense, we need to make sure that we've created a robust, repeatable marketing function or marketing flywheel, and a funnel that's taking prospects and contacts through leads into making them marketing qualified leads and ultimately sales qualified leads that our sales team can then go and talk to the market about. My background from the 90s is as an engineer, and that grounding or beginning has served me quite well through my career in terms of not only when I was an engineer obviously, but also when I became a manager and then ultimately leader of technical and engineer-based functions. Throughout that process, I've been a very keen advocate of defining process and policy within a target operating model for any department in which I've run, and ultimately improving those processes and simplifying the amount of processes and the waste and the inefficiency within those processes across those large-scale organisations before instilling continuous feedback loops that are based and there to optimise the process even further. Looking forward to taking the skill set that I've learned in building products and building sort of global processes in organisations and applying that to a marketing flywheel, ultimately as a funnel to build our brand, build our reputation, continue to build the product, optimise it, and then ensure that that's delivered back to the customer in the services and platform that they consume on a daily basis, which is Brooklyn. The vision we have for Brooklyn Vendor Assurance is one to be a dominant leader in the post-contract large complex deal vendor management space. It's a real unloved space and really fragmented. There's no real decent definition of what really solid vendor management or supplier management looks like across the industry, and it gets worse when you're dealing with really large complex deals as well. With no defined standard or defined framework to follow, it's hard for an organisation to work out what's needed and how much is needed to do. And it's also a good time from the fact the need is just getting bigger and growing. The last 10 years has been moving to a more gig economy. Everything's available as a service, which means a lot more of large businesses are being outsourced and provided back to them as services. And these large businesses historically used to struggle getting transparency and collaboration within their four walls and boundaries between the organisation and between the teams that operate within it, which becomes infinitely times harder when you've just cut a big part of that out and sent it off to a supplier to be provided back to you. That level of visibility drops significantly. So unless you've got the right tooling in place, the right team, the right process framework and robust operating model to help with that, it's really difficult. Even compounds a difficult problem of when it was internally, further when it's externally. In parallel to that, there's also the element of increased regulation that's going on. So you only need to look to some of the industries that, with regards to regulation, seem to be at the forefront of all the regulatory changes, which is more typically finance. They sort of set the tone and the way for other industries that follow within the next sort of decade. And you'll see that there's really robust regulation coming down now about how well the supply chain is managed. The companies within it are spoken to, processes refreshed with them, enhancements made, and all of that needs to be evidenced. So there's a real need for that. And that visibility. You compound that even further by the fact there's some really large scale, impactful social topics like environmental, sustainability, governance, diversity and inclusion, anti-slavery act, supply chains across borders, across geographies, and some of the economic and political things that are happening, that an organisation now has no choice but to really engage at a much greater level with their suppliers to understand the impact of their decisions in outsourcing stuff and engaging suppliers and how they're delivering that and what that does to them as a firm and what they are partly responsible for in engaging, and what their suppliers are doing is done in an ethical, standardised, safe, secure, sustainable manner. All the more reason and need to engage them further. This Chief Technology and Marketing Officer role, I really hope is going to help the company and the organisation understand a lot more in a scientific, data-driven way around how the start of its go-to-market strategy needs to execute, and the channels in which prospective customers and those that are working within the discipline of vendor or supplier management, and how we can best communicate with them as a group, and not only just help give them a trusted place, a place where they can untrust the data and the information and the leadership or the thought leadership and the advice that they're being given, just from a pure giving back to the discipline perspective and sense, but also then to learn which or when is the right time for us as an organisation to offer a prospective vendor manager or head of vendor management or chief procurement officer the services that Brooklyn as a platform provides, and not only ultimately selling and increasing the sales within Brooklyn itself, but also once we've tapped into that community and understand a lot more about them in like I said, in a data-driven manner, we can start to learn off that collective community as to what the industry requires, what the businesses of tomorrow need, and then build that back into the product vision for the platform and enhance it so we know or are confident that it fits the needs of the overall discipline before we ever release it, really, because we've taken the strategic line from that same community and then built the product that they desire, and ultimately then the product market fit is just strengthened more so than it is today. Within 12, 18, 24 months time, we're going to know a lot more about the front end of our business and how best to take Brooklyn to market, not only in the UK and EMEA, but US and hopefully beyond.